Welcome to the 11th chapter of the book of Mark. We just left in the 10th chapter. Jesus was going down into Judea. He went through Jericho where he healed Bartimaeus, the blind man, and now he is entering into Jerusalem. It begins in verse 1, and when they approached unto Jerusalem, unto Bethphage and Bethanian, Bethphage and Bethany. Let's go to our map and we'll show you where those are. Right next to Jerusalem, there's Bethphage and Bethany within 2 miles of Jerusalem. It was an hour walk or so. To the Mount of Olives. So the Mount of Olives was over in that area. Oros ton Eleon. Eleon, we had the word oleon back in the old days. People that are listening to this video may know what that means. It was what they called margarine. It was a new thing that came out after the Second World War. I guess that dates me. And he sends Theo, ton Mathiton, sends 2 duo of his disciples. The Mathiton, the mathematics, has to do with learning. And he says to them, in the imperative, go into the town in front of you, and immediately entering into it, you'll find a foal being tied, upon which not one of man has sat. Well, having untied it, lead it. And if anyone should say to you, why do you do this? Say that his master has need, and immediately he will send it here. The apostoli, there's an apostle that has to do with sending, people sent. And they went forth and found the foal being tied at the door outside, exoderm, the outer part of the skin, upon the plaza. And they untied him. Well, now, from what I've seen, like in the early West in the United States, if you untied somebody's horse and it wasn't yours, you could be sentenced to death for that. It was something you just didn't do. And here, these men takes a lot of trust in Jesus to go out and do that, because they could have gotten beaten up and who knows what all. So it was not just a small thing to go out and untie it, but yet Jesus says it would be okay and they would send it. So they heard Jesus and did what he said. And some of the ones standing there said to them, What do you do untying the foal? And they spoke to them as Jesus gave charge. And they allowed them. So the people allowed the disciples to take the foal. And they led the foal to Jesus and put upon it their cloaks, so he could sit on top of it. And he sat upon it. And many spread out their cloaks in the way. Odon, we have the odometer. And others beat boughs from out of the trees. Dendron, a dendrite is a branch-like carving in rocks that people in geology know what they are. And they spread them out in the way. And the ones leading before and the ones following cried out, saying, Hosanna, Hosanna. That was a word that meant save now, or deliver now. And they did this during the Feast of the Tabernacles, and the priests would say certain things, and they would use this Hosanna. Being blessed is the one coming in the name of the Lord. Evlogimenos, eulogy, something good about saying something good about somebody. Being blessed is the one coming in the name of the Lord. Being blessed is the coming Vasilia, the kingdom. Basil plant, the basilica, the one coming, a kingdom in the name of the Lord, the one of our father David, patros, paternal. So they were looking for this kingdom on earth, and one of our father David, I think. They weren't, Jesus was telling them about the kingdom is within you, basically, and it's there, and you are subjects once you accept that. But they were looking for the Messiah to come, which he was now right there in front of them. And they were proclaiming the Hosanna. Hosanna in the highest. And Jesus entered into Jerusalem and into the temple. So he walked through a gateway, large gates, and then he walked in to the temple, the Aaron, hieroglyphics, the hiero has to do with the temple writing. And having looked round about all, the hour already being late, horas is an hour as a transliteration, he went forth into Bethany with a dodeca, duodeca. That's what it means. Duo is 2 and deca is 10, 12. So now he goes back into Bethany. This is where Mary and Martha and Lazarus all lived. This may be around the same time. And in the next day of their coming forth from Bethany, he hungered. And beholding a fig tree far off, having phyla, leaves, of phylum and classifications of plants, he went to see if he shall find anything on it. And having come upon it, he found nothing except leaves, for it was not the season of figs. And responding, Jesus said to it, No longer from out of you into the eon may not one fruit be to eat. And his disciples heard. Well, this tree, it wasn't even a time for the tree to produce figs, and here's Jesus cursing it. Some people relate this to Israel, and Israel, God came at the time he wanted, even though it wasn't their particular season, and he didn't get the response, and so Israel was cursed, and it was destroyed in 50 years. But, and that's because right here afterwards Jesus cleanses the temple, goes into the problems in Israel. But we'll go back to the fig tree a little bit later, and maybe there's another explanation also. And they come into Jerusalem. And Jesus, having entered into the temple, began to cast out the ones selling and buying in the temple. Agorazontos, the agora, is the place where they bought and sold, the marketplace. Agorazontos is the buying, a place to buy. In the temple, and the tables, the trapezes, a trapeze, it's a flat object that acrobats stood on and swung back and forth and so forth, but it's also a name for a bank in Greek. So you went to Greece, it would be a trapezes, would be the bank. That's the name of what a bad bank. And the money changers and the chairs are the ones selling the doves he overturned. The money changers, apparently the temple money had to be in a certain currency of the temple. So when people came in with Roman money or some other type of money, they changed it over to the acceptable money for the temple, and they made money on this. They were usury. They wouldn't give the people what it was really worth. And so you may end up buying a dove, which normally would cost $1 outside, and you go into the temple and change the money, and your money all of a sudden is $5 for the dove, and these men would make $4. And they were buying and selling. Well, buying and selling in churches, I went to a very large mega church in Southern California for 10 years, which I loved dearly, but they did have a bookstore right on the grounds, and they sold all types of religious books and certain other little things, cards and knickknacks. And I don't necessarily think that was the right thing to do, but they did it, and these people were doing it also. And I went to a large cathedral in Brazil, and they had a mall next to the cathedral. It's the second largest Roman Catholic cathedral in the world, of Parousia, Our Lady of Parousia. And this mall was selling all kinds of rosaries and things that the Catholic people buy, little statues. And he taught, didaske is the verb, didactics is teaching, saying to them, Has it not been written that my house shall be called a house of prayer by all the nations? And this was in Psalms 118, 12 26. But you made it a cave of robbers. And the scribes and the chief priests heard and sought how they should destroy him. Now, calling them robbers and doing all these things, they didn't like it. They were going to lose their power and their money. They feared him, for all the multitude were overwhelmed by his teaching. So his teaching was right on. The people were just wanting to hear it. But these teachers in the temple couldn't compare to what the teachings of God taking human form. And when evening became, he went forth outside the Polios, the city, metropolis. Now here we go, and I underlined the power of belief. I think I would change this to the fig tree continued rather than the power of belief, because there's quite a bit here. And then all of a sudden it says, and in the morning, coming near, they beheld the fig tree being dried up from out of the roots. The rhizome, a rhizome is a root, roots. So they beheld this fig tree completely dried up, as Jesus said. And calling to mind, Peter says to him, Rabbi, see, the fig tree which you cursed is dried up. Now, this got their attention more than anything. They saw the fig tree a couple of the day earlier, and now the next day they go there and this thing is all dried up. Now, some people still would like to bring this back to Israel, but the things just I don't know. To me, it just doesn't sound right trying to attribute it to Israel. In responding, Jesus says to them, have belief of God. This is his response. It wasn't anything about how bad Israel was or anything at the end times or how he's coming to destroy or return. But he brings out something completely different. Have belief of God. He's got their attention. He's got our attention. Wow, he can do this. And what's he say? Have belief of God. Now, the belief of God is not have your own belief, because before it, with our own belief really can do nothing. It's the belief of God that delivers. For amen, but we have to have belief in Jesus for this to take place. For amen, I say to you that whoever should say to this mountain, Ori, be lifted and thrown into the sea, thalason, as it has thalactic, is it anything to do with the sea, and should not examine in his cardia, heart, cardiac, but should trust that what he says takes place, it will be to him whatever he should say. Well, I've heard a lot of people, saying this, and you should trust and not examining in your heart. Well, Jesus is God, and this is the absolute for him. He didn't examine in his heart. He knew what he could do and what he couldn't do. And he's just saying these things. And is he saying that we should do these things? Well, perhaps he is, but has any of us ever taken and thrown a mountain into the midst of the sea? I certainly haven't. So what kind of faith do I have? If this is what it takes, well, I can't. I haven't done that. There's no way, but God can. And it will be to him whatever he should say. Well, I don't know. I've had things I've asked and they haven't taken place. And I believe that whatever I ask is, it could be the wrong thing. I asked to go up to Canada as a missionary, and I got sent back with a purser of the ship with a revolver on the desk, taking me back into custody because they didn't want any missionaries in at the time because they had this Rajneesh thing going on in the United States. So maybe now I am a missionary to Canada, going through these video seminars. So it's in God's way, not necessarily our micromanaging everything. On account of this, I say to you, all as much as you ask praying, trust that you receive, and it will be to you. But I think that we have to see how we have received, because if we want it to be a certain way and we don't have it, and God has another purpose and he brings it about, it may not be the way we wanted it to be in the prayer, but yet God can certainly bring it about and bring about greater things. And whenever you stand firmly praying, forgive. Now he's bringing out now he's telling us what we need to do. Is the first thing was not examine, and then having belief of God. These are all things that Jesus is bringing out. It's nothing to do with Israel. I don't see that at all. And forgive if you have anything against anyone. forgive. This is a big point. Trust and forgive. That also your Father in the heavens should forgive you your transgressions. So this is very important to him to bring out to these men now that he has their attention with this dried up tree in front of them, and they're all looking down like, duh, how did that happen? And he's teaching them these things of attitude, basically. And I don't know I suppose if you want to twist it and it does all to do with Israel, I suppose you can. It's not this is the way I see it. And then in verse 27, and they come again into Jerusalem, and in the temple of his walking, peripatuntus, a peripatetic is a walker, there comes to him the chief priests and the scribes and the presbytery, the elders, Presbyterian church is of the elders. And they say to him, well, by what authority do you do these things? And who gave to you this authority that you should do these things? You just don't go walking out in the middle of the street and sticking out your hand and stop traffic because you feel like it, or you don't. There's things that we just can't do. You have to have authority to do it. If a policeman told you to do it or you're hired to do it, yes. But if you just go doing these things, telling somebody not to pay their tax or whatever, that's not normal, then you're going to be questioned. And this is what these men are doing. Why do you do these things? And suppose it would be natural. And Jesus answering said to them, but he saw where their heart was, and that they didn't have any belief in him or what he was doing, even though everything he was doing was good. Instead of saying Hosanna like all the rest of the people, they want to get rid of him, kill him. And Jesus answering, knowing their heart, said to them, and I shall ask you one matter. And you answer me, and I will tell to you by what authority I do these things. Okay, that's fair. Now you answer this, and I'll tell you. The baptisma, the immersion of John, was it from out of uranu, heaven, or from out of anthropon, anthropology, of study of mankind, or was it from out of men? You answer to me. And they considered among themselves, saying, well, if we should say, from out of heaven, he will say, well, why then did you not believe him, John? But if we should say from out of men, well, they feared the people, for all held that John really was a prophet, prophetes. And answering, they say to Jesus, we do not know. And Jesus answering says to them, nor I will tell to you by what authority I do these things. So Jesus is not going to give them what they want by their decision of not telling him what he wants. And then it continues in the 12th chapter. He goes into talking in parables, and hope you'll join us in the 12th chapter, and God bless.